Crouse.
Well, let's start at the very beginning. Tell me how you became involved with James Cameron and the Avatar project.
Yeah, well, as you probably know, I'm a professor at USC, but not in the linguistics department. I teach in the business school. I teach at the Center for Management Communication. I have my degree from the linguistics department. So in the summer of 2005, the James Cameron's production company, which is Lightstorm Entertainment, sent an email to the linguistics department at USC looking for a linguist who could develop an alien language. Fortunately, I have a close friend and colleague who saw the email and said, I bet Paul would be interested in this. And so he forwarded me the email, and I jumped on it. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak to James. And at the end, he stood up and shook my hand and said, "Welcome aboard." So that was quite a thrill.
It must have been quite thrilling, and also I would imagine kind of intimidating. And James Cameron is a very friendly man, but he is James Cameron. So was there any sense of intimidation?
There really wasn't. I felt very comfortable talking to him. He's well, to state the obvious, he's an extraordinarily bright guy, wide-ranging interests, and I just really had a ball talking to him about language in general, about his vision for the film. I mean, he gave me a copy of the script as it existed at the time, and we talked about what he was interested in the language, and he made me feel very, very comfortable, very relaxed.
Now, what were his initial requests of you?
Yeah. Well, he wanted a unique language, a consistent language, a real language with real rules and grammar and vocabulary. He wanted it to sound good. He wanted it to be pleasant sounding. He wanted it to reflect the culture of the Na'vi on Pandora. And other than that, he just gave me the ball and said, run with it. I didn't start from absolute zero because he had come up with a few words on his own, maybe about 30 vocabulary words.
Right.
These were mainly names of characters, names of some animals, and so on. So I had a bit of a sense of the sound he had in mind. It sounded a little Hawaiian to me, or maybe Maori, kind of Polynesian. Mm-hmm. But then I added some interesting sounds that I thought would be kind of fun, and the grammar was entirely my own.
Right. Now, what's the process involved then? So he gives you these names. You have an idea of the sounds and the sort of feel that he wants for it. How do you begin? I mean, this is something that people don't do every day, is create a language. So tell me what the starting point is.
Yeah. Actually, there are some fairly well-defined steps. Right. The first thing most people would do is try to pin down the sound system. So you want to talk about what sounds go into the mix, mm-hmm. and just as importantly, what sounds will be left out. So, for example, Na'vi has some interesting sounds. The ones that have attracted the most attention are these things called ejectives, which sound like et and poo and pat.
Right.
It also is lacking some very common sounds in English. It doesn't have a b or a d or a g. It doesn't have ch or sh or th.
That was obviously by design, but why would you choose to exclude those sounds?
Well, if the language is going to have more or less Polynesian sound, then typically Polynesian languages don't have what linguists call voice stops. Don't have b, d, g.
Right.
But when you exclude certain sounds, or more precisely certain classes of sounds, you get something that has sort of a unique feel. I've been using the analogy of cooking and opening your cabinet door and seeing an array of spices. If you put everything that you have into a dish, it's probably not going to taste very good. Right. It's not going to have any distinct character. But if you choose carefully, then you get something that has a unique flavor to it. So that's kind of what I do. As for which particular sounds, well, that's somewhat of a personal choice. I use sounds that I thought would work well together, right. And would give the language sort of a nice feel.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, all of the way along through the process, I assume that you're working with James Cameron, and he's saying, "I like it, I don't like it. Explain more to me." How was your relationship, or can you describe your relationship with Mr. Cameron?
Yeah. Early on, we had some pretty in-depth discussions about things. I wanted to make sure at the very start that he was happy with the sound of the language, so I presented him with some possibilities. I constructed what I called sound palettes, which are, I just made a couple of MP3 files with various possibilities for how the language would sound, and I sent him those. He didn't much like the first two, but the third, he said, "This is what I want." And so I had a sense of what he wanted. In terms of the grammar, though, with only a few exceptions, I was pretty much on my own. I just chose things that I thought would be interesting, would be accessible to people who actually wanted to learn the language, be challenging, but not too challenging.
Right. So is there somewhere, there is a sort of an elements of style for the Navajo language kicking around that you've created?
Well, that's a good question. What I turned into Fox Studios at the end of my contract was something I called the language document, which had everything that I had done in the language up to that point.
Right.
And it was about 140, 150-page document.
Right.
Had all the vocabulary, had all the rules as I had them at that point. I had all the lines I had translated both for the film and for the video games. So that's kind of the best that existed at that point in terms of elements of style. But what's really been interesting is what's happened since the film. I mean, there's been an explosion of interest, really, in Navi, and there's a whole community now, which is out there, I think literally thousands of people who want to learn the language and are doing their best to learn it on their own.
Richard Crouse.